Hello friends, my name is Emily, I'm the bi, and here are some books off of my bookshelf. So I wanted to talk briefly in this video about the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that have been happening all around the world, but specifically in the US, to counteract police brutality against Black people. As a white person on YouTube, however big or little my platform is, it is my responsibility to speak up. Not to speak over Black voices, but to amplify them. I also want to say that lots of Black activists and Black creators have put in tons and tons and tons of emotional and often physical labor to compile resources to educate everyone else on anti-racism. In fact, I will be putting links down below to resources that I have found personally instrumental in my continuing education on anti-racism in America and around the world. I will also be putting links down below to places you can donate, videos you can watch where the AdSense is being donated to Black Lives Matter and other organizations if you can't actually donate yourself. I will also be putting links down below to Black-owned bookstores that you can order from instead of ordering from Barnes & Noble or Amazon, and to my Own Reads playlist of Black booktubers. So today I thought I would do a big kind of bi rep list, essentially. This is in part because obviously I'm bi and I like bi rep and I want to read and consume all of the bi rep and have opinions about all of it, but also in part a video for patches. So I have all of my books separated out into 3 categories. I did do mostly books that I physically owned with a couple of digital stuff, but we'll talk about it in a minute. The categories are books with bi main characters, books with bi love interests, and generally queer, probably with some bi, but there's other stuff going on too, rep. So I'm gonna start with that rep because it's the most kind of loosey-goosey, but I think it's fun. Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is Becky Chambers' A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Now, this book is about a crew on a ship called the Wayfarer, and I believe that they're punching holes through the galaxy, like making black holes to create faster travel. They're essentially creating highways, which I think is a kind of neat thing to have a crew of a ship be doing because there's not that many things you can be doing in space. This was kind of a fun new thing that people can be doing. There are lots of aliens on this ship and it's kind of like generally queer. A lot of people are like, it's gays in space, and you're like, great, I love it. I think this is a good book if you're looking for generally queer sci-fi. The next book I want to talk about is Every Day by David Levithan. This is about a person, I think it's in first person, yeah, and something is happening. It's sort of magical or some such thing where they are waking up every single day in a different body, but they are in love with the same girl. So they're trying to reconnect with her and get back to her and kind of create this relationship as best as they can. So big bi vibes to this. Have not read this book yet, but one day I will. There's also a movie that stars Justice Smith in it, which is great because I love him, and also he just came out. Or we all came in, you know? I did also very briefly want to mention Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This is not necessarily bi rep in and of itself, but it is by a bi author, and there is queer rep in general, which is why it's in this generally queer pile. It's a dystopian sort of body horror YA that is very gross and very good, and I love it a lot. Thank you. The next thing I'm going to recommend from this generally queer pile is the Iron Circus comic Sex Machine. So Iron Circus Comics is a comic company that I really, really love. They're one of my favorite indie presses. They make a very wide variety of comics, but one of the things they do make are very sexy erotic comics, and I'll be talking about another one of their comics very soon. This is a very good, literally read it in one sitting, anthology comic about people having sex with machines and kind of how that works. It's very sci-fi, there's some bi stuff going on, there's also just like generally queer stuff, obviously, which is why it's in this section. But I would recommend this if you're interested in comics, specifically erotic comic, and if people having sex with robots and automatons and all kinds of things sounds interesting to you. I really love this. Works for me on many levels. Okay, so the next section is bi love interests. I don't actually have that many to talk about, but the 3 that I'm going to talk about are 3 of my favorites. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a long-running webcomic that I think is actually about to end, about a boy named Charlie and a boy named Nick. And Charlie is the main character and he is gay, and Nick is his love interest, and he's bi, and I love him. It's just so good and wholesome and lovely, and the art is very cute, and their relationship is extremely sweet. I love them a lot. The next book I want to talk about is also a very sweet comic series, and it's called Check Please by Ngozi Kazu. So this is also a webcomic that you can read online, so that's perfectly fine if you want to do it like that. I'll link it down below. But it is a very sweet comic about a former ice skater. I actually don't remember if he just isn't ice skating anymore, but anyway, he goes to college, he's a freshman, and he is joining the hockey team. And then he falls in love with the captain of the hockey team, who is bisexual. So he is gay, his love interest is bisexual, and it's very sweet, and I love it a lot, and he bakes, and it's just, it fills my heart with absolute joy. So you should read Check Please. Please. The next book I want to talk about in the bi love interest section is Katrina Leno's Summer of Salt. So in this book, the main character is a lesbian and her love interest is bisexual. And I would say if you're going to pick up this book, it is very sweet and soft, but also does have a sexual assault in it. You don't actually see the sexual assault, but it's talked about, and it's a big part of the story. That being said, obviously it's big summer vibes. It's set on an island that is like you can only get there by ferry, or I think there might be a land bridge that like gets covered in water at some point. It's very sweet. I love it a lot. I love the main character. I love the love interest. There's also a little magic, so there's some fabulism in here because the main character's family are witches and they all have magic powers. I love this book. I think you will too. Okay, so let's talk about the books with bi main characters because there are so many of them that I have here. I am going to separate this into books I've read and books I haven't read because I do have quite a few bi main character books that I haven't read yet, but I still wanted to mention them in case they seemed interesting to anyone watching. The first book I'm going to talk about is Yes, Roya. So this is another Iron Circus comic, and this is a really great comic that I will end up owning 2 copies of because they just did a colorized version on Kickstarter, which I funded, and I'm very excited to own 2 copies of this comic. This was the first Iron Circus comic that I ever got, and I really loved it. It is set in, I believe, the 30s in New York in the comic industry. So it's about a comic artist who is trying to make it, and he just isn't, it just isn't working for him. And then he finally meets his hero, who is a comic artist who actually doesn't draw his own work, but his very sexy wife does. But obviously it's the 30s, so women can't really draw art. And he kind of becomes entangled in this kind of polyamorous bisexual triad that's happening, and it's very good, it's very sexy, there's intrigue, it's short but lovely, and I would highly recommend it. The next book I want to mention is Pink Slip by Katrina Jackson. I read this book in May and I really liked it. It was a very solid adventure, but all of the characters are bisexual, although I think the main male character, you don't see it like happening, it's not in action, but the author has said that he is bisexual. All 3 of the main characters in Pink Slip are bisexual, and it is also a polyamorous triad, and it's about a personal assistant to 2 spies who is quitting her job to pursue her writing career, and they bring her in on one more mission and it kind of goes awry. It's very good, super fun, very sexy. I really loved all of the characters, and Katrina Jackson's just a fun writer. Keeping on the sort of erotic train, I wanted to talk about 2 book series by Sierra Simone, which I obviously can never stop talking about. So the first one is the New Camelot series. The first book is American Queen. This has 2 bisexual characters. Both of the men in the polyamorous triad are bisexual. This is polyamorous and BDSM erotica, so if that's not your bag, that's fine. But the 2 main male characters in this are bisexual. I really love this. This is a retelling of the King Arthur myth, and somehow the books just kept getting better and better. I like this one okay. It's from the girl's POV, and then the other 2 are from the guy's POV. The whole general story, I think, works very well for me. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about Sierra Simone, who is herself a bisexual author, is that she just has so many different types of bisexuals in her writing. So both of the bisexual male characters in this book are very much bisexual, but also bisexual differently, and like they have different relationships to their sexuality, which is the same for the Thornchapel series. This is the first book, Lesson in Thorns. This is also erotica, BDSM. It also has incest in it. So does New Camelot, but it's not in the triad. This one is in the actual relationship. So again, if that's not a thing you're into, I get it. But all 6 main characters from this book are bisexual, and they are all bisexual in very different ways. And I just think that's so fascinating. She just writes lots and lots and lots of bisexual characters, and they're all very different. It's very cool. Okay, to keep on the sexier end of all of this, I have 2 different series. Well, one is a series and one is just a standalone comic by Art Ronan. I love them both. The first series is Hard Drive, volumes 1 and 2. They're both out and available. I'll link his store down below. But these are sci-fi and lots of bisexual stuff going on. He is also bisexual, so like bi artists, you know? And then the other comic by Art Ronan that I wanted to talk about is Sunburn, which actually does the thing where the main character is bi, but the love interest is gay. So it's the reverse of the love interest is bi thing. And this is about a pilot, and I think he's just like generally on the plane. It's like a small plane, and the plane crashes on a desert island, and these 2 guys have to kind of survive until help comes, and they start a sexy relationship. And I love this comic so much, and I was so happy that I got it. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is written by a non-queer person, so there's that, take that into account. But Evelyn Hugo is one of my favorite bisexual characters in adult fiction. She is messy and astoundingly cool and sort of a deeply horrible person, and I love her. I love her a whole lot. This is a story about Monique, who is a writer at a magazine. She's not like a particularly big writer, she's sort of like a staff writer. And Evelyn Hugo, who is this huge starlet who's been married 7 times and won, actually I don't know if she's actually won Oscars, but she is like a big starlet from the beginning of the sound era of film. She has specifically requested Monique come and interview her for a piece on her selling some of her very iconic dresses, or auctioning off her very iconic dresses to benefit cancer research because her daughter just died from cancer. And so Monique gets there, she thinks this is what this piece is going to be about, and then Evelyn sits down and goes, "Let me tell you about my 7 husbands." And so it is the story of old Hollywood. There's some queer solidarity, there is some very intense biphobia, particularly from the love interest in this book, which I have feelings about. I mean, I think it works very well, and you know, I still have feelings about it. But I love this book. Evelyn is a very messy bisexual, and she's great. I love her. Iconic. The twist is very good. I wanted to talk about Red, White, and Royal Blue very briefly by Casey McQuiston, who's also bisexual, and I love her very much. So this book is about Alex, who is the son of the first American female president, and Henry, who is the Prince of Wales. He's not the crown prince, and he will never actually be king, but his outward appearance really matters to the crown, because of course it does. And they have some beef, or at least Alex thinks they have some beef. And when Alex gets drunk at Henry's brother's wedding and knocks Henry into the wedding cake, destroying it, they have to pretend like they're buddies, which of course they are not, and then they become, and then they fall in love, because it's a romance, baby. I also think that Alex's whole coming out and like his bisexual awakening is done so particularly well. You can tell that Casey McQuiston is bisexual because she just gets it, and it's so amazing to have it written. It's so good. So the next book on my list is The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. So Kay Ancrum is also bisexual. Both of the main male characters in this book are bisexual. There is some slight polyamory going on as well. So this book is set in the early aughts, and which like emotions. And it's about August, who has been best friends with Jack since they were kids. He's very clearly in love with him. And Jack starts kind of hallucinating this alternate world that's going on around them, and there's this big quest that they have to do, and August isn't sure if it's actually real or if Jack is kind of spiraling mentally. I reread it at the beginning of June, and I love this book so much. It's very emotional, you know, I just have lots of feelings about it. Thank you very much. And then finally, the last of the books that I've actually read that I'm going to talk about is Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender. So I finished this very recently, and I love it so much. It is literally like a 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, like it's it. Like this is it, fam. So there's that. So this book follows Felix, who is black and trans and bi and still questioning their gender identity, trying to figure out exactly what feels right. So they are in the midst of a summer session at their like private sort of arts school. And one day when they walk into school, there is an entire gallery of old photos pre-transition, including Felix's dead name, plastered everywhere in the school. They start getting taunts on Instagram from whoever put up the gallery, and Felix is very certain that they know who it was, and a revenge plot unfolds. There's also a very intense, I think particularly well done love triangle in this book, and I have so many feelings. It's romantic and queer in the best ways. Like, I knew I was going to like this book, but I didn't realize how much I was going to love it. I'm very thankful for its existence. Okay, so the next section of books are books with bi main characters that I have not read. So I'm going to talk very briefly about them because obviously I haven't read them, so I don't know that much about them. I don't really know how good the rep is, but I do know that it exists. But if you're concerned about how the rep is handled or anything, I would say do a little bit more research before you pick it up and kind of see how you're feeling about it based on what you read. I'm gonna start with the YA first. So we got M.K. England's The Disasters. So I think just the main character in this is bi, but honestly they all might be, who knows. This is a book about a group of kids who have, for one reason or another, flunked out of the sort of academy, the sort of Starfleet academy of this universe. And as they are being sent home on a shuttle, the academy gets attacked. And so they are kind of the last ones left. I don't know if that's 100% true, but they end up having to like save the galaxy, you know? The next book is E.K. Johnson's That Inevitable Victorian Thing. So this is a book set in the near future of England where I believe there is a reincarnation of some kind of Queen Victoria, and so our main character is that person. I don't know that much about the actual plot other than I'm pretty sure it has a lot of like court politics and that kind of thing. There's like the English Empire, so there's still kind of, you know, a kingdom situation going on, but it has a bisexual polyamorous triad in it. So I think both of the girls in the triad are bisexual, so we got two main bisexual characters there. Next up we have Gabby Dunn and Alison Raskin's I Hate Everyone But You, which is a book that they wrote together. I think they did because it's epistolary, you know, modern epistolary, so it's like emails going back and forth and back and forth. They each basically wrote a character. So the character that Gabby Dunn wrote is bisexual because Gabby Dunn herself is bisexual, and I've read a little bit about her talking about it because I don't actually know the plot of this book. It's a contemporary young adult, so there's that. But she was basically like, I'm a messy bisexual and I wanted to write messy bisexuals because I wanted teens to be able to see themselves as messy bisexuals in literature, that they don't have to be the perfect bisexual in order to be validated in their sexuality and in their existence, which I really liked, and I'm very excited to read this whenever I get to it. The next book I want to talk about is Justina Ireland's Dread Nation. So this is a zombie Civil War book, which I have been very excited to read for a while, and I need to get into it. And I didn't realize that there was queer stuff in it until the second book came out, which was fairly recently, and there are two girls on the cover and my brain was like, is this gay? And you know what? It is. So the main character of this book, Jane, is bisexual. I think in this book it doesn't happen till the end, but her love interest, I believe, is a main character in the second book. So if zombie Civil War with a black lead written by a black author is something you're into, then here's a book with bisexuals too. The Mysteries of Pittsburgh by Michael Chabon. So Michael Chabon is interesting because I don't know 100% that he has ever said that he is bisexual in those words, but he seems very polysexual based on the fact that he has had relationships with men and women that have been significant. He just happens to be married to a woman right now. It feels very Anna Paquin of him, you know? But Mysteries of Pittsburgh was his first book. This was his, I believe, dissertation book that he wrote when he was in either grad school or undergrad, who knows. But this book has a character who is seemingly a kind of Michael Chabon insert-ish. This is his most, I think, autobiographical of his novels, so there's that. Again, I have not read this book, but I think if there's going to be like a bisexual main character going on in a Michael Chabon book, it's gonna be in this one, so there you go. And then we have M.L. Rio's If We Were Villains. So many people have compared this book to Donna Tartt's The Secret History because it is very similar, where it is sort of centered around a murder that happens in this tight-knit group of friends in academia. In this book, it is Shakespeare instead of classics, and the main character is very, very, very bisexual. So if you want dark academia with a bisexual lead and Shakespeare, this book might be for you. And then the last book that I want to talk about is one that I've literally had for ages, and I haven't read it yet, and I don't know why I haven't read it yet. And I am slightly worried that it's not going to live up to the standard that I have in my brain. But that book is Anne Harradine's Pride, Prejudice. Pride/Prejudice? Uncertain. The subtitle of this is A Novel of Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth Bennet, and Their Forbidden Lovers. So basically, this book is like, what if everyone in Pride and Prejudice was having sex with everybody else in Pride and Prejudice? Ergo, bisexuals. And, you know, that just tickles me because yes, please. Obviously, I haven't read this yet, so I don't know how good or bad the actual rep is, but if that seems like a thing you're into, like, it seems like a thing I would be into, then this might be the Pride and Prejudice adaptation you are looking for. Okay, so that is a huge honkin' stack of bisexual books. Lots of variety, lots of genres and formats and all kinds of things. So hopefully you have not read all of them, and one of the ones you haven't read sounds interesting to you. If so, I implore you to buy it from one of the Black-owned bookstores that I've put in the link down below.